You're listening to the Verdigris podcast with Rae and Andi. I'm Andi.
And I'm Rae.
And we have a website. It's at verdigrispodcast.org. On that website, we have merch.
We have all kinds of fun things for anybody who wants to show their support and maybe encourage your friends to also check out Verdigris. We have awesome stickers and magnets with the Verdigris logo. We also have new design t-shirts and stickers that recall the bathroom episode, Keep Your Trap Shut, designed by our in-house designer, Print Jazz, and they are fab, so take a look.
You can also check us out on social media at Instagram and Facebook at Verdigris Podcast. Thanks for your support, everyone. Hi, Rae.
Hi, Andi.
Today, I'm going to start by asking you about all the weird questions you get when you tell people you're a preservationist. Because it's not just me, right?
No, I guess I do get weird questions. So I guess the first question I get is, does that mean that you repair art?
Oh, yeah. That's my favorite too, is like, oh yeah, the Mona Lisa or whatever. And you're like, no, that's not it. Right. Or like, oh, I have this random object in my house.
Yeah, I was going to say, I get that a lot too. And for me, for some reason, it's always like fabric stuff. So like, oh, I have this really old quilt and I want to say like, that's super cool, but that's not what I do.
Yeah.
You're somebody else who does it.
Yeah. Like that's not all my specialty. The other thing that I get a lot is, so why is it that my town won't let me do XYZ on my building? That's the other one that I get a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a lot of friends who are unsurprisingly architects. And so they'll say like, well, why is it so strict? Or why do I have to do this? Or,
Yeah, a lot of those. I ask this because I feel like there's still very much a misunderstanding as to what we do.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
That our job is still very much this mysterious thing. One of the reasons I think this is the case is that historic preservation is so new as a concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding too, because people, they think it's all about museums, right? So if people have any understanding, like, oh, right, okay, Colonial Williamsburg, which, yes, that is a kind of preservation.
Yeah. A kind of preservation.
A kind of preservation.
Yes.
It's not even the most prevalent kind. It's not the most, telling. It's, for me, not even, the most engaging. But it's what most people have encountered, at least consciously, right? I think a lot of people have no idea that the reason that the buildings they like are the way they are is because we have preservation. I think there would be more of an appreciation of like, oh, it does a lot of things. Not just, historic costumes and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And the thing that strikes me about all this is that, number one, as I said, that that preservation is so new, right? That as a profession, it's very, very new. I mean, we're talking in our lifetimes new. But even as a concept, it's really something that appeared at the same time that most things appeared, which is the 19th century. I know we harp on the 19th century a lot, but that's just when a lot of those building blocks for change really, really took place. Culture, life really changed fundamentally with industrialization. I mean, that's really what did it. And in the case of preservation, that birth, in a sense, of the very concept of preservation, to me, and I think to a lot of people, comes from two people in particular who are presented as these rivals or these enemies almost, right? These dueling ideas.
Yeah, they are presented as extremes on either end of how we do this.
Exactly.
And why.
And the thing that interests me is that, number one, I mean, I don't think they were ever actually enemies. For one, they didn't really overlap that much. One is younger than the other. But
yeah, I don't even know if they knew one another, like if they encountered one another's writings. Like I haven't found that.
I think that they knew each other's writings, maybe, but they definitely didn't meet in person.
Yeah.
But these two guys are the, as you said, the two extremes, the two poles of historic preservation. And I understand, dear listeners, that this sounds a lot like we're going to talk to you about theory today. And we are, we are going to talk to you about theory. But I promise, I think it's really, really cool. And in particular, I think it explains why we do things the way we do. And I think listening to the ideas of these two guys and the fact that they are at each extreme and that you're going to find that you're probably going to align with one more than the other, but you're definitely not going to agree with either of them 100%.
Yeah, and I would say that you're going to also see how different places within your environment take more of the philosophy of one or the other, right? That these continue to have influence because they are kind of polar kinds of ways of doing it, but that we still take from these ideas and apply them in various places.
Right. And so this starts from theory, but what we'll see is that this is actually like of the moment, first of all, and very, very practical, pragmatic. Like you're going to see this in the world. The best example I think that everybody will know about at this point is what happened with Notre Dame when it burned. And this all relates to the first guy that we're going to talk about today, one of the two dueling gentlemen.
Yay.
Yay. So in order to help you keep them straight, dear listeners, there is a simple shortcut to understand who is who. There is a French guy, because come on. I mean, you've been listening to this podcast. You know that's unavoidable. There's a British guy. And to help us keep them differentiated, one of them had a beard and one of them had sideburns. The French guy had a beard. The British guy had sideburns. So we're just going to keep emphasizing that just so you make sure you can keep them straight, because otherwise it's going to get a little bit confusing.
That is fair. Yeah.
So shall we start with French dude?
Yeah. Let's start with the beard.
Let's start with the beard. He had a good beard too. He did lose all the hair on the top of his head, but he had a good beard.
Yeah, he made up for it.
He did. Absolutely. So the first guy is a French guy. His name is Eugène Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc, or let's try to pronounce it American-ish. Eugene Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc. You can call him just LeDuc if you want, the Duke. And he was, well, as his name I think very strongly implies, a Frenchman. He was born in 1814, and he is really fascinating to me because he is, I would argue, the most important architectural thinker from France. There are other really big ones now that I think about it, but he's definitely up there. And he's a man who was incredibly influential. He did come from a family of architects, and he started his career like super young. Interestingly, he did not attend the École des Beaux-Arts, which is the French architectural school. Are you shocked?
I am shocked, actually. I'm over here laughing like, really? I had no idea. Yeah, that's exciting.
He turned them down twice.
That's even better.
He said that he thought that the education at the École des Beaux-Arts, which is the French architectural school, which is the basis for... Okay, then you know what? I'm going to let you take a lead on that one because you're the architect, not me. How important is the École des Beaux-Arts in the history of architecture?
Tremendously important, particularly in, surprisingly, American architecture, right? So it's the preeminent school of design, not just in Europe, but ultimately in the world at the time that it's operating. And it goes all the way from sort of a classicist approach all the way through modernism. And in the United States, we didn't have any kind of training for architects until after we actually had several people who got accepted to the école and then came back and brought those ways of training. And, to just kind of encapsulate it, it's it's the everything that you see in a movie, right? Where there's an architect in a studio and he has lots of people who are, and I say he specifically because there are very few women, he has lots of draftsmen who are like kind of creating his ideas, but it's like this sort of system of one person leading the ideas and everybody else kind of pitching in and creating it. And then that one guy kind of gets the credit for it.
Yeah.
But it's a system of learning by doing.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's hugely influential. It's the reason that a lot of architecture firms still operate the way they do today. It's the reason they love to have open office space, where the rest of us like to have walls.
Well, and I mean, when you think of, the famous American architects, all of them either went to the école or were trained by someone who went to the école.
Yeah.
Like literally all of them. I don't think I'm exaggerating.
Well, certainly through the mid-20th century.
Right. That's what I meant. And the U.S. respected the école so much, and American architects respected the école so much that it gave credence to architects who otherwise would have had trouble getting trained. In particular, the one woman who went to the école. We're not going to talk about her much today, but Julia Morgan was an American woman, Californian, who went to the école, and she was the first woman admitted to the école, not the first American woman, just the first woman, period, admitted to the école. So all this to say, the École des Beaux-Arts was the architectural school, and Viollet-le-Duc was like, nah, nah. And the reason that he didn't want to go was that when he was coming up into the profession, the école was still very much in the copy classicists, copy classical temples, start from that. And it was extremely structured, extremely, you could even say oppressive kind of education. And number one, he didn't want to do that because he thought it was boring. But number two, he didn't want to do that because he was an avowed Gothicist for his entire career. He loved Gothic architecture. That was his big love.
Okay, I will say that is something that they share. Ruskin and Viollet-le-Duc loved Gothic.
Exactly, right? So we think of them as these two polar opposites, but yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So
I think it's partially geopolitical, though, don't you think? Because one's French and one's English, and so,
Yeah, of course. So he didn't go to the école. He was trained by two. He worked at two ateliers directly without going to the école. But the main thing he did...
And that is a studio system.
Correct, yes. So do you want to elaborate on that too?
I don't know. I mean, an atelier is that system that I explained. Essentially, like there's a lead designer, and there's a group of people who then study under that person, and then ultimately, often those people then spin off their own ateliers, and they get draftsmen and journeymen and things to work with them. So it's essentially the working system,
right,
for design, and
so
it still is.
So in a sense, he did an apprenticeship, but he didn't take any formal classes.
Right.
I mean, to oversimplify, but that's basically what he did. But he also, mainly during his youth, traveled around France and around Europe, Western Europe, and just drew. He just was one of those people who went around, did the grand tour, and just sketched every single building that he saw, which, I mean, again, is still the gold standard for learning architecture, right? Is training your eye, training your hand to really, get those architectural details, get those proportions. And yeah, he absolutely did that. And then he immediately started working on historic buildings. In other words, he was never a practicing architect in the way that we think of as someone who makes new buildings. He did eventually draw some new buildings, but fundamentally his career was based immediately on preservation. At the age of 24, he got a position for the Commission for Historic Monuments of France, because that already existed in France. Again, France, in part because it's existed for so long as a country, and in part because it had had a lot of upheaval during the Revolution and during other events in the 19th century, was already starting to kind of actively preserve its buildings in a way that other countries hadn't quite started yet. So he was put in charge of a Romanesque abbey in the south of France to rebuild it. It had been heavily damaged It had an entire tower missing. And this work took a very long time. It took like 20 years, right? I mean, he started working on other stuff part of the way through. But what's really interesting is, until this point, the idea of documenting a building and then working from that really didn't exist. Like, he's the guy who was like, hey, we need to, make molds of things so that we can figure out what's actually there so that we can restore this building.
And as a counterpoint, part of the reason that nobody did that before is because the Gothic really was a vernacular language, meaning that somebody learned how to build that way, and then they trained their apprentices to build that way, and nobody wrote it down because it was passed from master to craftsman. So why would you need to, document things?
Exactly.
Everybody did it the same way, and it just evolved a little bit over time.
Exactly. So all of a sudden he's like, no, we have to make these molds, we have to make these drawings to scale to figure out what's actually there so that we can try to make these buildings realistic, right? But at the same time, he had another problem, which is, okay, well, why did the building fall down in the first place? Right? And figure out what the flaws in the building construction were, and then figure out how to solve that problem while still trying to keep the aesthetic of the building. Which, I mean, again, it's like the birth of a whole new, theory of, oh, wow, if we build it the exact same way that they did in the medieval era, it's going to fall down again. So we need to find another solution, and we need to use new materials in order to do that, especially iron and steel. He was really into iron and steel.
With good reason.
Well, absolutely. So in the case of this one abbey in the south of France, he lightened the roof, he built new arches, and he, changed the shape of the vaults and all these things in order to make it, stand. And of course, he's been heavily criticized since then because, is this authentic? Is what he's doing defiling the architecture?
And that's the theory point, right? Like that's, and people endlessly debate, what is this idea of authenticity, right? What are you saving when you're preserving a building?
Exactly. So after he started working on this one abbey, then he got put in charge of restoring pretty much the rest of France. I mean, I know I'm sounding, it's an exaggeration, but the Sainte-Chapelle first, then Carcassonne, then Notre Dame. So in addition to basically saving many of these sites, or perhaps defiling many of these sites, depending on how you feel about them, ruining many of these sites, depending on how you feel about, what he did, he also made just hundreds upon hundreds of drawings and eventually photographs and plaster molds of everything that he could get his hands on, basically, to document so that if they did anything at all, it would be fully documented so that later on, if something happened, then, hey, this time we don't have to do this detective work. All of it's been done. All of it's already archived. All of it's still available. And in fact, if you go to Paris and you go to the Cité de l'Architecture, which is a museum in the Trocadero, which was originally built for a World Fair, but then rebuilt, it doesn't matter. It's across from the Eiffel Tower. It's got beautiful views. Anyway, on the first floor of that museum, which is an architectural museum, guess what you're going to find? A sampling of those plaster collections of Viollet-le-Ducs that are, documenting all of these buildings across France. So I think that in itself is a treasure, even if you disagree with his methods of preservation, which, as we'll see, many people did. Anyway, he eventually taught at the École des Beaux-Arts, so he was too good to go there, but then he eventually taught there. He was a professor there for a little while. He hated it, and they hated him. The École was still in the 1860s very much a classical place. They were never, ever into Gothicism. Gothicism?
Yeah, I think that's right.
They were never into Gothicism. And they kept criticizing him and just did not like his approach at all. Interestingly, too, he was criticized during his entire career as, quote, not a real architect, because he didn't go to the École. I did learn a few facts about him that I didn't know prior to preparing for this episode today. One of which I actually did, I had heard about, which is the Empress Eugène, the wife of Napoleon III, loved him and really wanted him to design the opera house. But he did not win the contest. Everyone else hated his design. And so eventually Charles Garnier won. But the one that I really learned that I had no idea about is, did you know that he helped design the Statue of Liberty?
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
He designed the structure, part of the engineering. So did Eiffel, by the way. But he was friends with Bartholdi, the sculptor who designed the Statue of Liberty. And so he designed some of the engineering because he was a very good engineer, right? Because that's a lot of what he did. So he designed some of the structure, and he is apparently the one who suggested that they use copper for the statue.
Well, so he is, by way of a few degrees of separation, the one who named the podcast. He is.
Oh, wow. I mean, I've always loved him. So he wrote a lot, and he had some really interesting theories, ideas of how to do things. And so here's a quote translated into English to make your life a little bit easier, but this is from the Dictionnaire raisonné de l'architecture française du 11e au 16e siècle, which means the Reason Dictionary of French Architecture from the 11th to the 16th century. But he says, to restore a building is not to maintain it, repair it, or remake it. It is to reestablish it in a complete state, which may never have existed at any given moment.
I love that. So as an architect, I will say that I love the idea that his intervention, by definition, whatever it is, makes it better. And like, to me, that just seems like that's such an architect's point of view.
Absolutely. But it definitely is going to ring alarm bells for a lot of people, because what he's really saying is we are making this building into something, again, a complete state which may never have existed at any given moment. In other words, is this real? Is this authentic? Or does he push too hard, too fast in one direction? He tried to explain what this meant. So he said that it had to be documented. Well, that was number one, right? Yes, you need to document everything with plans and photos and archaeological records and all that so that you're exact, which, yes, that's the basis of our job today. So absolutely. Second, that it's not just about appearance, but also structure, that it has to be structurally sound and ensure as long a life as possible. What that means, though, is that if there's a more solid material available, yes, he would 100% go for that more solid material. And as we mentioned, in particular, iron and steel, even though that would not be historically accurate.
He sometimes, doesn't he write about this idea that if people in the medieval era had those materials, they would use them.
They would use them.
It's not like,
And
they would shun them. And I think that's why he thinks it's okay.
Yeah, so when I think of Viollet-le-Duc, Mr. Beard, what I think for, like, the word that comes to my mind always is pragmatism. Like, he's all about, making it last longer, making it stronger, making it durable. And if that means you gotta, tear down some stuff, rebuild some stuff, this is going to last longer if we build it this way, then yeah, he is not going to hesitate. That's what he's going to do, even though they would have never been built that way. His rationale, as you just said, is, well, when you look at Gothic architecture, they were trying to build it in the way that made sense to them, and this makes sense now. So It didn't exist back then, but it exists now, so we're going to use those means.
And he also really respected the fact that they were trying to make them last as long as possible.
Yes.
Unlike a lot of our buildings today where we intentionally say, like, they're not supposed to last a long time. He knew that in the medieval times they were building cathedrals they thought to last hundreds of years. So if they had better material, they would have used it. Or if they had different techniques, or if they, because they were always improving.
The other thing that he really emphasized was the whole point is to make these buildings usable for the long term. So again, pragmatism, right? If making some changes is going to make it more usable, then that's what we're going to do.
So here's how I summarize that. Mr. Beard is an architect, and architects fundamentally want their buildings to be used. And so he sees the greatest good as a lively, used building. And a building is much more useful if it's stronger, if it's going to last a long time, if it's not in ruins. And that might be a good place to transition.
Yeah. And then we can let the battle royale actually work. But first, you are going to introduce our other gentleman, Mr. Sideburns.
Yes. Mr. Sideburns is John Ruskin. And as Andi mentioned, he is an Englishman. And so I'll give you a little bit of a background. He is actually not that much younger. He's a little younger. And so he's born in 1819. And all of the pictures I see of him, he looks very much like the Romantic poets, right? He looks like Shelley.
He's so Byron-esque. Oh, my God. You can see him walking on the moors, you guys. You can see him walking on the moors and writing, like, dark poetry.
Yeah. So when you get kind of the brief description of his life, they describe him as like a polymath, like he's good at everything, right? But then a lot of people describe him specifically, and I think this is important, as an art historian. Now, I always describe him as more of an artist. But either way, he looks at architecture from the point of view of the production of a beautiful object. And so I'll get more into this, but ultimately he thinks of restoration as bad because you're destroying that original piece of art by adding your own something to it. Even if it's just cleaning it, you're taking away the beauty of age. So where does he get all of these ideas? Well, he's pretty privileged. So he grows up fairly wealthy. His dad is a wine and port importer.
Ooh.
Yeah. Although he dies when John is fairly young, and he grows up in London. So, a very worldly city. But because of his dad's job and then their wealth, he actually travels a lot. And so while he's not trained as an architect, he kind of does the grand tour, right? He starts when he's fairly young, accompanying his dad on travels and, around England at first, and then to Scotland, and then to France. And then later on, they actually intentionally spend more time in the continent. And so they go to Strasbourg and Milan and Genoa, and then ultimately Venice, and he gets really excited about the Alps. Like he just falls in love with the mountains.
He's probably yodeling.
Yeah. I mean, and
I'm sorry. He was probably walking brooding on the mountains instead of the moors.
I think that's what it is. I think it's the romantic idea of the dark landscape. Anyway, so all of this really influences his ideas as well. And he is, I would say, first and foremost, a writer, above everything else. And he loves to think about theory and ideas, but he also writes poems. And he's also a quite accomplished artist. He's a draftsman. And he falls in love with, as we said, Gothic architecture as well, and sees that as the most perfect expression of beauty in architecture, that it's truly almost connected to the divine in the way that he talks about it. And so that should be the highest ideal that everybody aspires to. But he is also, because he is like the perfect liberal arts guy, right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. So he also, he loves geology, history, ornithology, botany, literature, like kind of everything. And so he ties all of these ideas of what is beauty, what is art, what is human creation into ultimately his writings on architecture. He writes about a lot of other things too. Actually, he's much more prolific in writing about painting, which is why a lot of people see him as an art historian.
Wasn't he deeply religious?
He was, yeah. So that's what I mean by he's connecting all of these human creations to the divine.
I think it's really interesting how both of these guys really were into Gothic architecture, but they came at it from completely different points of view.
Yeah.
Right? That Ruskin was all about that idea of the Gothic as pointing to God, which, I mean, it did.
Yeah.
Right? And it was really kind of a homegrown architecture that was meant to be deeply religious, deeply rooted in religious Christian belief. It was also at the same time this very, as you noted, vernacular and very practical style that was built to last for centuries,
Yeah.
ideally forever, right? And, those cathedrals took so long to build because they had to be so structurally sound. And that's the part that Viollet-le-Duc really gloms onto, is that idea of making sure that history and that usage continues on into the future. So it's really interesting to see how they both love the same stuff,
Yeah.
but for very different reasons.
And I will say, as I was trying to look up a date on Wikipedia, I actually found that they did have some correspondence. And Ruskin, at the beginning of his career, thought that LeDuc was terrible, and then changed his mind towards the end. So I will just give you a couple of quotes. Early on, he said that a building should be looked after, and if it is not, it should be left to die. And so we'll talk about that. Essentially, a ruin is more honest to the creation of the artwork than cleaning it up and fixing it up and rebuilding it, right? Whereas he later on says he expressed regret that no one in England had done the work that Viollet-le-Duc had done in France.
So, that's so interesting, right? Because Ruskin's approach is so deeply respectful
Yeah.
of the artist and art as a result of intent, right? That you don't mess with something that someone else has made.
Right.
It's not yours.
Yeah.
And okay, I tend to be more on the Viollet-le-Duc side. I know, hold your shock, hold your shock. But that respect, in a sense, is going to die if the building dies.
Yeah.
Right? You can't keep that love of a building if the building is a ruin. There's something deeply romantic about a ruin. Of course, you want to walk around the ruins and again, we're going to have to share a picture of this guy. He
Yeah.
just looks like, picture Heathcliff in your mind. That's what he looks like. He's got good hair too.
He does, and if you Google him, all of the first portraits that come up when he's young, he has his hand, in his shirt,
Yeah, like Napoleon a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very...
It almost looks like he has his hand on his heart, like he's pledging something to you in looking at the viewer. I don't know. I love that.
Everything that came out of his mouth was just really thought out and beautiful and affecting.
Oh my goodness. I bet he was just exhausting to be around. But I would like to meet him, but I don't know for too long.
Yes, absolutely. The issue with ruins is, okay, yes, ruins are so romantic. And just like for Viollet-le-Duc, for Mr. Beardo, it's all about pragmatism. For Ruskin, Mr. Sideburns, it's always going to be romanticism. That's the word that pops into my head all the time.
So I would argue that they're both romantic. Honestly.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. So I was thinking a lot about this because, Ruskin's the obvious romantic, right? And he's romanticizing the medieval times, the medieval architecture, the artist's intent, the connection to the divine, all of those kinds of things, right? And also because he's working within this sort of naturalist philosophy of the natural world is the expression of the divine and all of those kinds of things. But I would say that Viollet-le-Duc also romanticizes the past. He romanticizes the idea and the evolution of design.
Oh, yeah.
And this whole idea that he could improve upon the past by using modern materials because he can get into the mind of these idealized designers of the past.
So he's almost like an idealist in a sense.
Yeah, but I think he romanticizes the past in a similar kind of way. Like things were better then, basically, in his mind. Like this Gothic architecture is his jam.
Yeah.
And I don't think he sees anything beyond the Gothic as being as good.
I would agree with that. He thinks that there's scientific improvement. He's way into that.
But not the
design.
Not the spaces, not the way that materials are used, not the way it makes you feel, right?
Yeah. If anything, he thinks that classicism is retrograde.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, well, and also a little pagan.
Yes, a little pagan. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, okay. You're not wrong at all. Okay, but to come back to Ruskin.
Yeah.
So he wants people to basically walk around ruins and, respect the ruins until they go back into the earth and then move on to other things.
So to be fair, I would say he doesn't want everything to be ruins, right? I think that's an extremist kind of view. And he certainly thinks that ruins shouldn't be messed with.
Right.
But here's why I kind of, as I get older, I like Ruskin even more, is because he appreciates the age that buildings take on.
Yeah.
And this idea that taking off the patina of age takes away part of their beauty. And a lot of people explain it in modern kind of terms as saying, like, he would not agree with an older person, none that I know, who might want to do, some sort of plastic surgery to take away their wrinkles. That he would say the wrinkles are beautiful. They show this wisdom of age. And he wants the wisdom of the age of the building to also be there. And I think part of his love of ruins has to do with the whole, see if I get this term right, the Reformation. Basically, when they create the Church of England and they violently push out all of the Catholics, and they burn down the churches and everything else, I think in part his love of ruins comes from that kind of not wanting to basically whitewash history, right? Not wanting to pretend like those were creations of this Protestant regime, or you know what I mean? Like, I think that's part of it is his version of authenticity is don't fix it, because then that covers up what happened, right or wrong.
And then you're disrespecting the building, and in a sense you're disrespecting yourself. You're not giving the proper attention, the proper veneration, in a sense, of those existing buildings. And I mean, that brings us to his main book, which
I adore the title of. I have to say, I have it sitting here in front of me.
I know you do. Yeah, I mean, we all own this, so this is definitely one of those signifiers. Like, you're a preservationist if you own the Seven Lamps of Architecture.
Well, of course, because it's a Dover edition, so it's super inexpensive too. Like it's like,
oh yeah, you can buy this.
$1.
You can buy this for $1. This is not an expensive signifier.
It's probably also downloadable at this point. I mean, because it's out of copyright. So,
sure.
Yeah. Anyway, it's called The Seven Lamps of Architecture. And what I love about it is he talks about these ideas of the 7 good qualities of architecture as being moral. So I will just give you the list of terms that he uses and see how many of them you think apply to buildings, right? Because I struggle with some of these.
There's a few of them that I think of, and of course, when I think of 7 anything, I always think of the dwarves. So, but okay, go ahead.
Okay,
or 7 deadly sins, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like the dwarves actually. This might be a fun way to think about it. Anyway, he says these are considered vital and inseparable from all good architecture. Sacrifice, truth, power, beauty, life, memory, and obedience. Okay, right away, the first and the last to me, I'm like, how the heck is a building obedient? Like,
how is a building okay?
And what is it sacrificing, or what are you sacrificing, right? Now, he does spend the entire book kind of going through all of these principles, and I will not bore you with all of those details, dear listener, but essentially his idea is that you should truthfully express the way the materials are used, right? So in the United States, we think that we use this principle, but, we cover things with stone, right? Like they're actually steel on the inside. And so he would say, like, don't do that. If it's steel, show me that it's steel. And, power, beauty, all of those kinds of things. I think we get the obedience is going back to his love of Gothic. He's like, that's the best architecture ever. Everything else after that, why bother? You should obey the design principles of Gothicism. And sacrifice, I don't know if I could explain. It's still, it's this idea of kind of understanding that buildings are part of the world that has a finite beginning and end. And so, like, humans have a lifespan. And in his mind, buildings have a lifespan, and you should maintain them as best as you can. And, you should eat healthy and eat your veggies and get 8 hours of sleep. And you should, make sure to repair something when it is cracking. But if you didn't do that, your cleanse at the beginning of the year isn't going to fix everything, right? You can't just come in and rebuild the building and say, see, it's lasted, it's fine. And so I think that's kind of where he's coming from. This idea of as long as we are respectful of it throughout its life, eventually it is going to go away, and that's okay too.
I find it interesting that again, these 7 lamps are very kind of moralistic.
Yeah.
And I know I said earlier, like, oh yeah, Viollet-le-Duc, the most important French writer of architecture. And then I was like, no, I'm wrong, because the one that immediately pops into my head is the Abbé Laugier,
Yeah.
who in the 1700s wrote, the Abbé Laugier was an abbot. Abbé means abbot in French. And he studied architecture and said that basically architecture, to be moral, to be godly, had to follow the rules of Greek architecture, because he thought those were derived from nature and therefore derived from God. I don't want to go off topic and talk about the Abbé Laugier. That's a whole nother topic. But what's really interesting is the idea that architecture as moral imperative.
So architects have always been writing about this from the very beginning of writing about buildings.
Yes, but I feel like Viollet-le-Duc kind of doesn't do that. He's not saying this is moral or godly. He's saying this is the proper way to do things.
But that's exactly what all the theorists are doing, is saying this is the proper.
I guess he's just not bringing God into it.
Right. Yeah.
But okay, so you can tell which side I'm on. I'm probably closer to the extreme than I should be, in fact. This is where I have to admit, like, Viollet-le-Duc has his critics, and he has his critics for very good reason.
Yeah.
Not everything he did was, well, I mean, we can look at Carcassonne, and I have some pictures.
Oh, good. Because I have never been there, actually. I mean, I looked at it online, I will say, but I've never been, so. Oh, wow.
All right. So on the bottom, the illustration that I'm showing Rae right now is a skyline of Carcassonne. So Carcassonne is a medieval French fortified town. It's in the south of France. If you've played the board game Carcassonne, then you're at least vaguely familiar with it. It is a very cool fortified town, in large part because it has a double wall. So it has an inner wall and an outer wall, and then inside there's even more fortifications. I don't think it was ever actually taken by force, because this was just a really, really good medieval. But when Viollet-le-Duc got there in the early 19th century, what was left was missing a lot of stuff, and the space in between the two walls had been overtaken by housing. And he redid the city. And I wouldn't call it a reconstruction, in that a lot of it was there. But number one, he took out these whole communities along in between the walls. He also redid especially the roofs of the city. And he redid them in a way that is historically inaccurate.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the image that Andi is showing to me, this is the first time I've ever seen it, and it's fascinating. So it's an etching, and on the bottom, it shows what the city looked like in 1853, which was prior to the restoration. And then in the top, it shows what it looks like after post restoration. And I mean, so the very first thing that you notice is how pointy it is. Right? So after the restoration, absolutely every tower, every building, everything seems to have, like a pyramidal roof or a conical roof on it. I mean, it's sort of like when I was a kid and I would draw, what does medieval architecture look like? Well, of course, it all looked like Rapunzel, right? The fairy books that I had. So they all had, these really pointy towers, and, they were all made out of stone. And that's kind of what it looks like. It looks a bit fantasy-like, because I mean, not all of the buildings would have necessarily had exactly the same pitch, or all of those.
Many of them wouldn't have had a roof at all.
Yeah, especially the wall. What I really noticed was, so there are these big buttresses on the wall that surrounds this fortified town, and each and every one of those buttresses has its own mini, like, conical roof on it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can see in this picture. This is a picture that I took, but notice how on this side of Carcassonne, notice these roofs compared to these roofs.
Yeah.
Do you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Viollet-le-Duc was from the north of France. Carcassonne is in the south of France.
Oh, okay.
What material should the roofs be made of?
they should be red tile,
Uh-huh.
which some of them were, but I can see that a number of them are not.
Yeah. So actually, when he redid all of it with slate.
Oh.
And eventually, in the last 50 years, maybe longer now, as things have failed, they've started to replace them with red tile because that's the correct thing in that part of France.
Where in the world did he get all of the slate? Did they have to
He must
bring
have
it
brought
down
it in.
from
Yeah,
the north?
yeah,
Oh my goodness!
yeah.
Wow.
His design for Carcassonne, to be clear, the place is amazing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's gorgeous.
It
Yeah, don't
looks
get me wrong.
incredible.
Yeah.
It is, if you get to that part of France, please go check it out. It is absolutely worth a visit. However, is it historically accurate? No. Just no.
Yeah.
That's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
And he did as well as he could, maybe, considering, but that said, had he done nothing, what would have happened? And the answer probably is, well, Carcassonne might not be there anymore. And
Right.
if it was still there, it sure as heck wouldn't look anything like what it did in the medieval era.
Right. It would have completely evolved in a different way, and maybe only very small portions of it would have still been around.
Yes. And that brings us to, I think, that the case study that really exemplifies the tension between these two men, which is Notre Dame.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so Notre Dame is the main cathedral of the city of Paris. Fun fact about it is that it is considered the geographical center of Paris. When you talk about distances to Paris, the distance, kilometer zero is the cathedral.
That's so cool. I had no idea. Now I know.
Fun fact.
Yeah.
It was built in the 1100s. It took about 100 years to build, as, cathedrals. And it's had lots and lots and lots of changes over time. And I think that's something, this misunderstanding of cathedrals that I think a lot of people have is you build a cathedral and it takes 150 years and then it's done.
Right. It's always being built. It's like anybody's house, right? Where you're like, there's no such thing as being done with your house, right? You're always fixing
Don't
it.
we all know it? Yeah. So Notre Dame was built in the 1100s, but lots and lots of changes have been made since, not just to the cathedral itself, but to the areas around it. In particular, a few things happened over the years. I'm just going to go over it really super quickly. Later on, I think in the later 1200s, they added a spire. The spire was not original to the cathedral. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time. The spire was not original to the cathedral. It was added later. And it did stand for a bit, but then it fell down. I think because of winds. I think that spire fell because of winds and not because of other things. But then the other event that is really super important in all of French history always is the Revolution in 1789 when, churches around France were looted, destroyed, burned down. A lot of saints were beheaded. So others other than Saint Denis are going to lose their heads at this point. Saint Denis, always my favorite saint. Oh, and also Saint Genevieve, the patron saint of the city of Paris, but it doesn't matter. Okay. Going back on topic. So Notre Dame was heavily damaged during the Revolution, just like every other church was. And then it's kind of not treated well until, you know what's going to change everyone's opinion on Notre Dame.
No.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh, okay. Wow. I'm teaching you something. Yay. But that doesn't happen until Victor Hugo.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Very cool.
Victor Hugo is the guy. Oh man, and we could talk about Victor Hugo. What a fascinating guy he was. Anyway, Victor Hugo writes Notre Dame, and right. So you all know this book, right? You all know the Quasimodo and Esmeralda and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, everyone's like, "Oh, look, we have this building. It's really cool. It's in bad shape." So at that point, the French government's like, "Okay, Viollet-le-Duc, why don't you do some work on Notre Dame because it's not doing so hot?" And at that point, it is restored? ? I'm not sure how we would define exactly what happened to the cathedral at that point. This is when the parvis of Notre Dame is really, really cleaned up. That's the parvis is the space in front of a cathedral or church. It is the sacred space in Spanish traditions. It's called the Campo Santo, the sacred ground. But so that space is really important for like parades and that kind of event. But so that's all cleaned up. The space around the cathedral's really cleaned up. And that's when they put the spire back on the cathedral. But it's not really putting the spire back on because they didn't really have any documentation.
I was going to say, it was a new design.
And so they built this new design. Now to do that, they're going to go to cathedrals around the country and take molds of, gargoyles and statuary and whatever, and base it on other cathedrals of the same time period. So they're not basing it on nothing. But, dear listeners, this would not in any way pass muster in today's preservation world. This would be considered a rank amateur hour. No, this would be considered just straight up illegal. What do you think?
Well, that's a great question.
In a historic district, it would be considered illegal anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I'm somewhat comparing it to all of our discussions about the White House right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would be, if it were in a historic district, absolutely, they would not be allowed to do this. But I feel like if it was a building that was going to be adaptively reused, what they did was great, right? And in some ways, I guess they were adaptively reusing it because the way that people were using churches at this point was very different than it was, what was that, 600 years prior. So they were adapting it to the modern era. And as a result, they changed the way a lot of the spaces were used. I mean, honestly. Yeah. But that's why I love LeDuc, because he's an architect, right? He's like, how do we want to use this? How do we want to make this a living space again that incorporates all of the artifact and all of the art and kind of continues on that tradition, instead of saying, yeah, you just have to adapt to it. It's old, suck it up.
So he builds in a way that would have been medieval. It's not historically inaccurate the way he built it, right? So he chose old growth oak for the structure and covered in lead, which was the standard at the time. Does all this research to find statuary that fits, and then puts the statuary all along on the spire and everything. The piece of, I think what makes him most an architect, Rae, is his just boundless ego.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. That's exactly what I think too. Yeah. I mean, he's like Frank Lloyd Wright, isn't he? He's like, I'm right.
Yeah.
Just listen to me.
Yeah. So Ruskin would have been probably insufferable to be around. But Viollet-le-Duc just strikes me as a guy, all right, Mr. Beardo, he strikes me as a guy who just would refuse to be like, no, I'm not wrong. Like, just no. Like, I'm right. This is right. You're wrong.
I also think that he had the kind of enigmatic personality that I think he would be able to suck so many people in. He'd be like, I'm right. And people would be like, yeah, you're totally you are right. Absolutely. I will do whatever you say. Yeah. Whereas I think Ruskin was probably a little bit
weirder?
Yeah.
Like he'd sound more out there, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he would just be harder to get behind.
Yeah. Because Viollet-le-Duc, you definitely see like, oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, okay. Right? And he put all these things back into usage. Again, as you say, like, it's largely thanks to him that historic French buildings are still around. I mean, like, honestly, he's the guy.
And it's not me, actually. Ruskin said that. So
yeah, right. And even though, are they like accurate? Not all. No, but are they there? Are they strong? Are they going to last a long time? Yes. And so he builds this new spire for Notre Dame. And speaking of ego, did you know? I think you do know this.
Yeah, I think I do.
Yeah. There's a statue of him among the statuary. And he's looking up at the spire like he has a headache. Like, or, like he's thinking deep thoughts
or
about
he's impressed by his own work. I mean, that's just my interpretation.
Probably. It is fantastic. It looks amazing. Anyway, so, man, talk about a monument to his own ego.
Yeah. But I love that. I love that he's like Hitchcock, right? He's just himself in his own movie.
Yeah, why not? Have a cameo. Yeah. Do it. So then that brings us to the fire, right? When the fire happens I think it happened 2019.
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think it was 2019. Right. I cried. It was very upsetting. I was very, very worried there for the cathedral for a minute, and they did such a good job. Everybody did such a good job, and the clergy were able to get a lot of the artwork out and protect all the artwork, and then all the emergency people did such a great job. Anyway, the restoration of the cathedral has been fantastic. And I've been lucky enough that I've been to France, to Paris, multiple times during those years to see the progress of the work. And it's been like super cool to see. They've really highlighted the preservation efforts. But this is the part that's really fascinating about it. Number one, Notre Dame is like the best documented building probably in the world. And that is thanks to one guy, and that's Viollet-le-Duc. Like, he's the reason that we know that we have all those plaster casts. We have literally the information on every single piece in that cathedral. And we had it already prior to that fire because of Viollet-le-Duc, because documentation to him was this absolute mission, which is amazing. I think that's awesome.
So I will say, if dear listeners, if you have not had the privilege of going to Paris several times during the restoration process,
I sound like such an asshole.
No,
I'm sorry. I sound like a very snooty person.
I did not mean that at all. What I meant was that because it is such a well-documented building and so beloved, it is continuing to be so well-documented. And there are a million documentaries out there that you can just Google. Mm-hmm. I can say there's a really good one. I think it's on Nova that I watched on PBS, where they go through the whole process of how they know what they know and what the decisions are and what they were. I mean, there's just so much out there because they had so much information to start with. But like, you can virtually travel to Notre Dame anytime you want. Just Google it.
But the thing is, though, so the Spire, when it was rebuilt, I don't think is the way that he would have rebuilt it. That's the part that fascinates me the most. So on the one hand, the really great restoration work that was done is thanks to Viollet-le-Duc. But the approach to rebuild the spire, la flèche as it's called in French, the arrow, the actual design of it is not at all what he would have done.
Why not?
Because we have better technology now than we did in the 19th century. So he would have immediately said, no, we're not going to build it from these oaks and they documented where every single tree came from, you guys. Like, you can see a map of France with every single location of every single tree that they harvested for this, which is amazingly cool. But he would have said, use new technology. Don't use the old stuff. Use what, and like Viollet-le-Duc in particular would have been like, yeah, use like titanium or something. I don't know.
So I think he would have I think he might have been okay with it if they were able to say, here's the qualities of the oak that are spectacular. And I will say some of the documentaries go into this because the whole point of using the old growth oak, which is not like, new stuff, is that it actually doesn't burn as quickly because it has such
tight rings.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got a lot of the really hard materials. So it prevented a lot of destruction. So I think he might have said, okay, well, let's at least consider using the old stuff because it has these qualities. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we made the decision to go back to the oak because that's how it was, and not because we thought not everybody was all in on the properties are going to make it last the longest.
Right. So do you think Ruskin would have liked that better, or do you think they would have both been kind of annoyed from different sides?
Ruskin would have hated it, I think. I think he would have hated it because, like I said, he appreciated scars and aging. And so I don't think he would have said, like, keep it open to the sky. I think that's maybe a misreading of the way that he approached kind of ruins and everything else. But I think he would have said, like, repair it, bring it back, to a usable state and respect as much of the process of what happened. But no, I don't think he would have wanted. There's all these quotes because he gets rather riled up about restoration. And so there's all these quotes about how it's like the worst thing you can possibly do to a building. And
right, doesn't he say like it's basically killing the building?
Yeah,
basically
exactly.
Murdering the building by preserving it.
Yeah, so I think he would have hated the recreation of the spire, just like that it was a flat-out lie, that it had nothing to do with his lamp of truth. But I think he would have been okay with putting the building back to use. I really do think he wasn't an advocate for just letting everything fall apart.
I'm definitely more on Team Beard than Team Sideburns, personally, right? I vibe with Viollet-le-Duc more. But Yeah, they both are at the extremes of the continuum.
Yeah.
And I think that preservation in the United States definitely shies away from Viollet-le-Duc, is really worried about really embracing that pragmatism and is worried about, and I wonder if this is in part because we're such a young country.
Yeah.
That we're like, no, we're for real old.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to do anything that could be accused of being false history.
Yeah.
And I think in France, which is much, much older, there's less of that, where it's like, yeah, okay, but like places like Carcassonne or the Sainte-Chapelle or the Mont Saint-Michel or any number of these other medieval places, they just would not exist anymore without intervention. And yes, is it a little bit Disneyfied? Is it a little bit a made up thing? I mean, yeah, it is. But what's the alternative?
Right. And so I think in the United States, we do a lot more LeDuc than we admit.
Yeah, we're kind of like embarrassed by it,
Right.
I guess.
Yeah. I mean, because just every historic district that has houses in it, right? If we were really taking this idea of not doing any restoration, of not doing any change, we both live in the historic district and we wouldn't have indoor plumbing.
Yeah,
So,
no thanks.
End of story. And that probably means that none of those buildings would still be around, right? Because they're not poised for modern living. And so, but I don't think that we embrace this idea of improving of materiality. Like there's all these struggles in the United States and in historic districts in particular on should we allow places that have wood siding on houses, should we allow them to have something that's called fiber cement? And fiber cement is basically like a really good, hardy kind of material that you can make look like wood. And maybe that's part of the problem is that it can kind of fake wood, but you can make it look like wood. It has the same kind of patterning and shadows and all of that kind of stuff, but it's really fire resistant. It's not going to break down. You don't have to paint it every 10 years. Like it's got all of these advantages, but it's not authentic. And that really gets back to this. I think this is what both Beard and Sideburns are debating about is what is authentic, right?
Absolutely. That question of what is authentic is really important
Yeah.
because if it's not authentic, if you don't believe it, if you don't trust it, then you're not going to want to protect it anyway.
Right.
You're not going to want to go see it. You're not going to see any value in it. On the other hand, if you insist on absolute authenticity, then you're lying to yourself. That's not going to be a real thing. You can't live that way, right? So going back to a place like Williamsburg, nobody's going to live that way today, right? If you're saying like, oh, we have to keep it authentic, then what you're saying is this stuff is dead, right? This stuff is no longer in use as a place to live, to work, to do things. It is now a museum.
It's an artifact instead of an evolving place. And
Exactly.
I go back to this idea of in the United States, what are we trying to preserve as authentic? And we tend to sort of fall along this line of the materiality. That the original, beam is more authentic than the way that a place was used or the overall feel of the space. And I think this is where I go more with LeDuc because I'm like, no, a building that is breathing and used, even if it's for a different use, is more authentic to the purpose of building something than something that is kind of locked up and has the original door, but only 10 people a year come to visit.
Exactly. I mean, as a planner and not an architect, I'm all about use. Like that's what's important to me. Keeping the vibrancy of a space, and in urban planning we call this placemaking, right? This idea that a place feels like a place, right? That you're not in, sprawl hell where you could be literally anywhere in the US, is that you're in a place that has an identity that feels like it's rooted in time, and that you could, like if you've ever seen those geoguessers and like some of those people, man, they're like, oh, this is the dirt from,
I love those.
and like, I'm not that person, but you show me a picture of a downtown in the US and unless it's not been taken care of, unless it hasn't been preserved, yeah, I can tell you, at least the region of where you are, if not the exact downtown, in a way that I think is, it makes your life better if you're in a place that has that sense of identity, that sense of place. And to me, that's, again, very Viollet-le-Duc. And even if some of that is a little bit invented, okay, that's not great, but to me, that's better than letting it go to ruin.
And I would argue that it is also very Ruskin, because Ruskin has an appreciation for the artist and the creation that LeDuc kind of doesn't.
Yeah.
Like maybe he does, but he doesn't express it. And I think Ruskin has a reverence for that artistic expression and social and cultural expression that is lace, right? And I think that his love of that, I mean, okay, he was a little stuck in the Gothic, right? So I don't know that he would care about what we do to, 19th century
Well, I mean, neither would
downtowns.
Viollet-le-Duc,
Yeah.
so.
But I think that the spirit of Ruskin says is that the beauty in the human creation should be preserved.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of what we do in terms of preservation is Ruskin on that level rather than the preserving ruins. We don't do that very often, honestly. It's too expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what do you do with them other
Right.
than walk moodily along the moors?
Well, I mean, there's a really cool ruin around here, actually.
Yes, there is.
Actually, I wasn't even thinking the one downtown. I was thinking of Barbersville. So there's an 18th century house that may or may not have some connection to designs by Thomas Jefferson. It's a cool design, whoever designed it, but it was burned and it's now ruins, and it's on the estate of a winery, right? So they have, there's vines everywhere nearby, and they make really cool wine, and they put their ruin on the label. But for a while, they were also using it for outdoor Shakespeare, and so like there are things you can do that are cool with ruins.
That's true.
And I would say that is one of the most magical memories I have of seeing a play is I took friends there, and we all it was outside in the summer, and we
drank some wine.
Yeah, we drank some wine. We spread out a big, a blanket on the ground and the stars. And I mean, it was, I like any kind of live performance, but something about all of that added to it in a way that seeing it in even a beautiful theater wouldn't have. So
Absolutely.
there is an artistic quality that's important about ruins. I don't think we should get rid of all of them.
I'm with you. And I think, again, while I'm on Team Beardo, I think that one of the struggles for this episode was to think like, what is it named in my head? And the first thing that I came up with was duel, but it's not really a duel because I don't think these guys are actually all that opposed to each other. And I think it is very important for anyone who is on Team Beardo to really think about Ruskin's approach before they do anything, and vice versa, that like these are, two ends of the continuum or two sides of the coin or however you want to call it, but they actually work together. And good preservation really considers both sides. You can't just go headlong into Viollet-le-Duc's side of things, because if you do, then everything becomes ahistoric and everything becomes the means to an end, and that's not what preservation should be either. But if you just stick with Ruskin, then yeah, okay, you're going to be moody and walking the moors, and that's great, but like eventually, you need a job and a life. So, and maybe a cup of coffee or something. The best way to approach preservation is actually to take both of those ideas and keep them in your head at the same time.
So here's how as we've been researching to talk about this, I've been thinking about it as like a palette that you're painting from. And you have both, Beardo and
and Sideburns
and Bernie's ideas as, kind of different things to pick from. And every preservation project, you're going to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And one of them is going to be weighted more, it's going to be more blue, it's going to be more red, this one's going to have more green, because you're looking at it as an individual kind of approach. And it's not a cookie cutter. And I think both of them would actually be behind that idea that every approach should have a mixture of all kinds of ways, depending on what the point is, right?
Yeah.
a little bit of this, a little bit of that,
little
mix
bit
it
of-
together,
yeah.
and you know.
And that brings us back to, I think that the commonality between these two guys, which, dear listeners, I encourage you to do as well, I know Rae and I both do as well, is it's all about going out there, looking at architecture, drawing architecture.
Yeah.
Like, in the end, it's all about just letting your eyes feast and trying to, internalize that feeling however you can do it. And if you can't draw, that's okay. There's other ways to do it. But just that sense of awe that you get when
Yeah.
you see a building that really affects you. Like, that's what these two guys were about, really, in the end.
Yeah.
And it's really funny that, again, to this day, people are like, well, that's not architecture. Well, you're not an architect. And it's like, well, okay, but like, this appreciation of the built environment is
Yeah.
something that they deeply shared, even though their perspectives were different. Continuing to share that love is what it's all about.
Yeah, and I would also put in there that they drew because that was their kind of ability, but what they were doing was experiencing the architecture, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, that's what we both teach, is getting our students to experience the architecture around them and to appreciate not just, sort of its aesthetics, but how it makes you feel, how
Yeah.
it makes you do things. And I think that's what they were trying to express.
Absolutely. Go enjoy that architecture.
Right, and think about it. Like, think about especially the most boring buildings you have to occupy that you think, this has nothing of value, it's not pretty, it's not anything. Think about why the decisions were made to make it the way it does, and what does it do well? Because I bet it does a lot of things really well, even if maybe it doesn't satisfy some other things. So in the end, preservation is about kind of keeping our built environment vibrant. And I think both of them would agree with that.
Yeah. Team Beardo.
And Sideburns.
Team Sideburns. Figure out where you are on that continuum, and really any of it's great as long as you give it some thought.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rae.
And thank you, Andi. This was a fun conversation.
It was. All right. Well, we'll see you next month.
All right. Take care.